Go. Okay, so welcome to the second episode of U+WE Teachable Moments. This week we've got a program lead from psychology, Jennie, who's program lead for psychology and criminology. And so this is an academic focus one this week, sort of alternate between the students and the staff. So let's see what we learn about the last year. So Jennie, hi there. Even though we
Hello.
just chatted beforehand, but it makes it seem organic, doesn't it? Um, So you mentioned that just before we came on, you mentioned about this being the crossover of Easter break, and you've had the first few days. But I guess you had I don't know if it was help or not Easter weekend because it goes into Monday, which means there's more family around to help. Like it's the second week, you kind of feel my wife's got next week and she's got the full week, whereas technically I only had Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday because of the bank holiday. So there was more of us around. So how have you found this Easter break compared to homeschooling work
I
combo?
I mean, this is my daughter's in reception this year, so we would have had a shift anyway from, a nice full-time childcare, like 8 to 6 full-time that she was in preschool, nursery, to being schools and school holiday hours and all that. And I think that last year when it was lockdown one, we figured if we could get through that, we could get through a school holiday, a 2 week school holiday. So we had, I mean, my husband has dropped a day now where he doesn't work on Fridays, which has been helpful. So that's what he's doing today. But yeah, otherwise it's kind of mixing and matching where, the university being closed helped because, it was just closed. And then I took off yesterday and the day before. And then next week I'm teaching. So, it's kind of like cobbled together again,
Yeah, so
our
people
various
dropping in and
annual
out.
leaves and
Was your husband going to drop a day? Was that a long-term plan, or was that
yeah.
it wasn't in response to lockdown that it just became a bit easier?
No, he was already planning it. He was going to do it when she started school, and then they were quite busy, so he only started it in January. And it's, yeah, just more of a home life balance, which, it's working from home life balance.
Yes. So you were, I don't know if it's lucky really. I felt that we were lucky with lockdown one in that our youngest is in nursery and the eldest she's in year three now. But because my wife is a physio in the NHS, we were offered a place at nursery and at school. And we thought, well, technically I can keep an eye, like Lucy, the eldest, is more manageable at home, whereas Entity, because at least you can give her schoolwork to do and she can kind of
Yeah.
look after herself. Whereas giving at the time, 2 year old, uh, entertaining him all day when you're trying to work was a nightmare. So we were like, yeah, he'll go in and we'll keep her at home because we feel guilty sending him when we don't really have to. But for you, you started lockdown in that nursery. There's, you can't duplicate the structure of nursery at home. At least at school, you can go, there's a bunch of, activity books that school's given you, go to town. Whereas,
Yeah,
although
yeah.
even now, I guess her being in reception, because that's more structured play with some lessons like phonics, it's
Hmm.
less sit down and focus. That must have been a nightmare
We
transitioning
tried
from
to do a
nursery.
few teams chats, and I think the other thing about reception is all the children are at such different levels that if you're trying to teach them at a level, I mean, they were doing things like, they were showing them a picture of a triangle, and they said, "What shape is this?" And we were like, "Is this what they're doing in reception?" But and I mean, she's got, some children don't speak English. Some
Oh,
children
right.
haven't been at any kind of preschool before, and so they're trying. I think at reception, they're trying to get them at a similar level, and so when they're doing online Teams chats, I think that they have to maybe teach them to a more broad audience. But I mean, the attention span, it's very different from teaching students on Teams. It's, everybody wants their video and their mics on, and they want to show you their toys and
Do they keep disappearing as much as well? Like
yeah.
when with students and with our students, when even if you've got a bunch of cameras on, if there's more alleged attendees than there are cameras, that there's people that have just kind of go, I'll pop off for 20 minutes and I'll come back. And the school kids are a bit like that as well. They don't even say, I'm just going to go ask a question. They just leave. And then, Lucy will appear up here and I'll be like, you're doing your morning's team call. What are you doing here? And she'd be like, I just had a question. And you're like, go back down. This is the, that was quite distracting. So did you find the same thing that your daughter was like, I'm just going to pop off for a minute and go and grab a toy random?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She mostly wanted to see her friends. So we found that like if we pinned her friends, then they would, she could look at them and see what they were doing. She missed them, the ones she was with her. The worst time was they were isolated for 2 weeks. They were sent home.
Oh.
They had a few staff outbreaks, and the whole reception bubble was sent home for 2 weeks or 10 days, I think it was, right before Christmas. So
oh no, and then came back. Well, didn't come back.
they went back for a day, I think, and then they had Christmas break. So.
And that was probably the day where you just play games and wear your home clothes anyway.
Yeah.
That last do nothing day. Yeah, we had there was one day it was in this second lockdown, as it were. It was more structured, the after Christmas one, and Luce was they had a morning call and an afternoon call with the class because they were kind of combining both classes in the year group. So it was more of a get you going in the day, and then it's self-directed, but we've got all the stuff online. And I heard the call end from up here, but then she seemed to still be talking, and I went down, and she and her best friend had stayed on the call, and just no one had ended it, and they continued chatting for like 90 minutes, and they were just it was like they were just hanging out online. You're like, I feel like the school should have ended the meeting rather than just left the room. But it worked well for them because it gave her a chance to catch up with her properly, because they'd just done a couple of WhatsApp chats that term, so that was quite nice for her. But I find I wonder if it's very analogous to the undergrad student experience as well, where like the ones that join really early, like the lecture starts at 2, and then you get this boom, someone started the collaborate or the Teams thing, and you're going, there's like 35 minutes before the class starts. What in the world are you doing there that early? It's not like sitting in the lecture theatre early because the room's vacant. You're just looking at yourself. It's kind of encouraging, but it is strange. Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't have any when she was still in preschool. Like you said, she didn't have any sense of a structure. There was no structure to the day. Like now, she was, even over Easter break, she said, "Oh, we do phonics after lunch," and I was thinking, "Oh, that's the kind of thing I could have used in lockdown one, some kind of schedule." But it was like, she didn't actually have to learn anything. She didn't,
just stuff to do.
She was 4, so it wasn't like she she needed kind of a bit of stimulation, and she what worked really well for us working full time and having her in full time education, where most of the time that we were with her, it was like high quality, lots of engagement, child entertaining, child focused stuff, in the evenings and weekends. All of a sudden we were like expected to be like that all the time when we were trying to work. She wanted that. Yeah. So she, she didn't want me to look at a phone, to look at a work email while we were watching TV. She wanted me to watch TV with her and talk about what was going on. And, she's really into the pretend play. Like I've noticed, I think every other word out of her mouth is pretend. We're driving in the car and she's like, pretend you're a child that doesn't know how to drive a car and you're crashing into everything, or pretend we're kittens and I'm the mummy and you're the baby, and like it's just constant pretend play all the time.
How do you simulate that in a car? I mean, when Ollie says like, we'll be in the car and you go, right, we're the bad guys and you're the good guy and we're in a spaceship. So I'm supposed to be flying the spaceship and I have to push around like the hazard button to fire the missiles and things like that. And you think that's fine, but when he's like, now go fast, you're like, dude, I am not accelerating just to simulate rocket boosters on the road. That's insane.
Like I'm at a traffic light, I can't move down.
So yeah, like go, and you're like, I'm not going, it's a red light. A lot of pressure on him. So that must have been really hard, because there was that, we all went through that time of is it Wednesday, is it Sunday, who cares anymore? But when you're trying to get that structure for a kid, you've got to sort of say to them, no, it's 5 o'clock on a Friday now. We're done for 48 hours. That's it. We're back to normal lounging around. Did you find that was quite hard, her finding that line of we stop schoolish stuff now and we move on to just lazing?
Yeah, I guess so. She just it's I guess in some ways it's easy because at least with a 4-year-old, and she's just turned 5 now, you can really mix education and play in a way that she, there's not really, it just kind of blurs together. So you don't feel guilty if she sits and watches TV for, an hour or so, because sometimes she's doing, like, yes, the other day she was watching Storybots, and they were talking about different kinds of animals, and you like this as a biologist, but she went and classified all her stuffed animals. So she was putting them into like vertebrates and invertebrates and animals and mammals and birds and lizards and stuff. And I'm like, I'm just going to let this happen.
Well, there are some great ones. Like Storybots is amazing, and they get quite a lot of famous actors on there as well. And those sorts of shows, when she puts them on, I'm like, you go to town, you binge that. That's fine. I was just watching Doctor Strange
for number blocks you want.
Yeah, number blocks, that's another one, isn't it? And alpha blocks, and you'd think it's only 5 minutes, but that's fine. It's better than Peppa Pig, And I was just watching, or I'd started watching Doctor Strange before I came up, and Lucy came in and asking if she could use the tablet. And the rule is, you can no watching stuff on the tablet. You've got to do like Operation Ouch game or the CBB stuff, no nonsense games. And so what's happened to him? And he had all the frames on his hand from the car accident and this sort of thing. And I said, oh, he's broken every hand in his body. And he goes, my God, there's 27 of those in each hand. I'm like, how the hell did you know that? And that's from things like Operation Ouch. She's rereading this Operation Ouch book and is learning lots about medical stuff. And you think, that's what I could have done within lockdown 1, because there was when they suddenly went from normal school to nothing, but you were trying to, before they really got into the whole, we need to think of some online lessons and provide them. It was very much try and do some spelling with them, and we'll try and send home some worksheets. And it was very much made up on the fly because everyone had to pivot like we did. And so that ran out very quickly. And then it became clear that it wasn't critical to do. And it was heading towards summer holidays anyway. So there was a period of going feral where, it wasn't worth trying to get her to do anything structured at all. But we're now now that she's been back at school, she's like reinvigorated with her, I get the point in learning now, and I quite like it. And now she's seeking out books and things. So that's quite nice. That was, the pivot was not good for school kids, but I don't know how good it was for academics though, because you must have had to do throwing up your exams online very quickly as well. I was quite lucky that all my stuff was already online, so I didn't have to pivot anything. Whereas everybody else had.
My exam in the first lockdown was canceled, so it was just like they just decided, it's a massive first year module, and there was an exam, a multiple choice exam that was meant to be at the end, and our accrediting body was okay with a lot of. They were very okay with the changes. So they just canceled it, and and so we had maybe 4 weeks of teaching left where it wasn't actually going to be assessed. And so it just, became, focus on the coursework that you still have. So it was a bit odd, although there was more reset support, I'd say, in the, with the uncapped reset. So in the summer, there was a lot more communication throughout that. But yeah, the pivoting online, it really varied. I think that we adapted really well in a way. Like as a team, we were really understaffed, and we were already kind of in crisis mode and problem solving mode, and well before the pandemic, and we pulled through okay. I think we'd built a lot of trust up with each other and with the students. So like from my perspective as program leader, I felt like the well-being issues of everyone was more of an issue than making sure the assessments were adapted.
So in those last few weeks, did you have to throw up recordings from last year? Or did you do it online live very quickly? And like you say, because the last 4 weeks weren't assessed, did everyone go, yeah, I'm not coming to that?
We had a mix. So I had, it was actually my topics at the end of the year. And I'd recorded them the year before with the Panopto, like in the lecture. So I used that lecture material, but then we did online live seminars, and yeah, the attendance wasn't great. Out of a maybe 300 some students, there was maybe about 10 a week going to the
Oh my
seminar.
God. But that was problem-based. It's like I say, you were already doing kind of problem-based learning stuff anyway. Like you were taking, well, here's the stuff, and then we're now going to do something with it. So even then, where you're almost saying, yeah, that there's not a grade, we admit that because it's been cancelled. It's still kind of useful though. They went with what we know that students do, but we hope that they don't do. Well, if there's, I'm chasing the grade. Thank you very much. That's, you know,
Yeah,
so
I'll be working on my other report for this other module that's due.
that has exactly. It's like not people not showing up to classes on a Tuesday because that's submission day. You go, you could have submitted it before the deadline, right, and not missed classes. But you know, so do you think that's the reason? Because that is strange to for a lot of our first year modules. It's very broadcasty because there's so many of them, and you've only got so many of you. And but in an area where you're already using content to do something with it, it's slightly surprising to find that they didn't engage with the here's now a chance to do it in your pajamas, effectively.
Yeah. I
Thought,
think I mean one of the things that I've learned this year, at least with my module, and my module being Introduction to Psychology, it's a very broad introductory module. It covers a lot of different topics. It has a big group in it. Is that the way that we'd been structuring our module probably needed a bit of a shakeup, because what we had was we had an hour and a half lecture and we had an hour and a half seminar every week. And I think that it became the assessment. We had a couple essays and some weekly tasks to do, but we had these big multiple choice exams that were, you know, with multiple choice, they're quite factual. They're not a deep conceptual type of assessment, and they're really going for the breadth of the course rather than any kind of depth. And I think that what we were seeing was that, you know, students were seeing the lecture as this is where I find out my notes of what I need to revise for the multiple choice exam. And the seminars were kind of like, here's some extra stuff to make you interested in the topic or extra, but you're not going to get a multiple choice question that's based just on like the seminar, because they were more interactive and stuff.
It's almost inaccessible, isn't it? Because you've got no way of knowing. You've got a plan in your mind of this, what I'm going to ask you all to do, but you don't know how it's going to go. And
and there's inconsistency. We've got a lot of different groups, a lot of different seminar leaders, and so I think that what we were finding previously was that, you know, the lectures were there, and if students missed the lectures, there was the slides, and you'd get the students that said, I missed the lecture, there's not enough on the slides, can you tell me what I missed, you know?
I like the question they ask with they say, oh, you know, like that, you know, I've watched the recording, but can you tell me what's going to be covered in the exam? And I love that question, because I go, anything I've ever said, put on slides, pointed at, possibly any of my stories, because they usually vaguely relate to what we're talking about. Basically anything at all could be in the exam. And they're like, oh, but that doesn't help. How am I supposed to revise for that? And you're like, well, show up, engage, ask questions, be a part of it. That will probably help, you know, because then you don't have to revise as much and cram it in. So it's funny I like that division though, the half and half. With this, like say the seminars, the lecture was all 300, right? Like, you know, giant amount. And then you kind of broke them off into smaller groups, like I would practicals. And so with that, is that at the same time? Is it 90 minutes, you know, 9 till 10:30, and then you have a quick break, and then they go at that point to different groups? Or does each seminar group have a different slot in the week?
They're all over the place. I mean, it's with the timetabling and the room capacities, they were a bit all over. So they used to have Friday afternoon would be their lecture, and then the next week they'd have seminars on either Mondays or Thursdays was the way. But by this point of the year, our seminars, we'd be getting about 10 to 20% attendance.
Just in a normal year.
And what we're finding this year is, I mean, some of it's because of the assessment. I think the assessment demands are a bit lighter. You know, they're online, multiple choice. They've been broken down a little bit more. I don't think that there's as much of a pressure of I need to focus on the facts that are going to be tested on the multiple choice exam. So I'm only going to focus on the lecture slides, in the lectures. So we've got the asynchronous lectures, and then we've got the seminars. And the seminars, I think, we're still probably getting more like 60 to 70% attendance with the seminars now. Wow. And I think it's because it's the only kind of live timetabled thing. So, I assume that they're watching and taking notes on the asynchronous stuff and still engaging with the one live session that we have. But I think some of the assessment demand's been removed in a way that we're able to, I'm being idealistic here, but that we're the love and interest of the topic.
True. It's a nicer way to be, I think, particularly in a time of such uncertainty. Kind of go, this is what I want to believe is going on.
I mean, these are first years, so you think, I mean, I know I was getting a lot in the summer, and they were like really bored, I guess, because what were they going to do in the summer? These, their A levels were canceled, and some of them were like, can I just have some psychology stuff to read or watch or listen to? I'm really, I'm really bored. I really want to listen to it. So, so I think that, overall, I'm hoping that there has been, the way that we get the seminars too is, in the seminars, sometimes the students would be a bit shyer, and it was more like a mini lecture again with a bit of activity. And I think now we're getting a bit with Mentimeter and the chat function and a little bit more brave questions.
Yeah, they can be brave without having to be as brave as you would like, because they can type in a question. I was saying that to first years, it's almost in the first lecture actually, when I ask a question of the class, please, for the love of God, answer. and they get, and I don't care if you're wrong, because it doesn't matter. And if anybody laughs at you giving the wrong answer, where was their right answer? As far as I'm concerned, you're the bravest person in the room because you had the guts to say something. Mm-hmm. Whereas the person goes, oh my God, I can't believe I'm wrong. Yeah, but you weren't brave enough to even have a shot at it. Mm-hmm. So you try to encourage them that way. So there's this middle ground of, well, I'm not quite brave enough to ask a question, but if I type it in the box, if it gets answered, great. And if it gets missed, that's fine too, because it was probably a silly one, and eventually we do want them to be able to just bravely go, I've got a question and it might be daft, or I've got an answer and it might be the silly one, but it doesn't matter because I'm building the confidence. Because eventually, and I always do say to them, at some point, you're going to have to talk to another human face to face, or at least verbally. Like an interview isn't going to be, if you want to type your answers to these interview questions in the chat, that'll be fine. That's not going to fly. So we're going to need to build you up to be able to talk to other people, and be brave and put your hand up and all this sort of thing. So it's trying to get that out of them in this online environment as well, which is quite hard when we've got, well, you can raise your digital hand or type it or email me afterwards or put it on your social media group.
Or
yeah, exactly.
Ask somebody in your own WhatsApp group.
It's really hard to figure out who is getting more confident and who isn't, because of the different functionality we've got. And it's something that we should continue using, but make it kind of I always say to them, please do, if you got a question, like, use the chat if you want, but I'm not going to be looking at it particularly, because I prefer everyone to raise their hand and ask, because you've at least got the anonymity of mic on, camera off if you want. So no one can see you going, oh my God, and that, just to build that bravery a bit. But then I suppose with the seminars you had, well, like I said, that there's been an increase in seminar attendance because of hopefully the enthusiasm's there, because they're like, well, this is all we've got this year. We're new students. We've never been to uni and we've still got that. But you also mentioned the assessment burden is a bit less as well. So I suppose I don't know if I've got three theories on that as to which ones, I know which one would be nicest, that it's the enthusiasm, but I also wonder if previously now you've got an asynchronous recording of the lecture, where there's not the ability to ask in the moment. Can you explain a bit more about that, or add, expand on that a bit? Because they're thinking, well, I kind of need to know that for the assessment, for this big MCQ exam, but I don't quite get it. So I'll ask now what it's going to be. Whereas now they've got the asynchronous lecture, there's not that ability to ask in the moment, which means they get, if I want to know more about that because I didn't get it, I've got to come to the seminar and ask there and wait for my opportunity. So whether it is still a bit assessment driven or it's human contact, thank God, and they come to the seminar that way, or they're thinking, well, I really love, the subject, and I had less education in over the summer period, so now I'm fully in it. And I don't know if it's one of those or a mix.
Yeah.
And
Oh, we have a Q&A as well, but it's specifically about the lecture, but with the lecture, but it's on a Friday afternoon, which I think is still unpopular despite despite people being at home and not having as much to do. I think Friday afternoon people have had it anyway still, so.
I suppose you get that with you still have people arrive late to a lecture when it's online or any kind of class, and you're like, you had to cross your bedroom. How are you late for that? I had to at least come up 2 flights of stairs to my study, and I'm still on time. So I do find that quite funny. That and like you say that the Friday afternoon thing, you got low attendance. You're like, yeah, but no one's going away this weekend, so it's not like you wanted to start your weekend early.
You have to go get the bus home or anything like that.
Yeah. So that's still quite funny. There's the same patterns of behavior. I don't know if I notice it a bit more in levels 2 and 3 than level 1, because like you say, that enthusiasm of so second and third year is still coming late, even though they should still have that enthusiasm because they went through the cancelled exams and that sort of thing. So it's quite surprising that there's still, I guess, the same patterns of attendance, that it drops when there's deadlines coming up and peters out across the year. And I don't know if that's because, well, I'd say it's because we still did online lectures and they're like, well, it's being recorded anyway. So, and I wasn't going to say anything because I'm one face in a sea of faces and my camera's off. But if you were already experiencing drop off when you were doing seminars because it was more clear what was tied to the assessment, then it might, but you've now had an uplift. It might be that there is that, this is the time to interact. That sounds like it's more the driving force. But if it's first years, how have you found it with level 2 and 3?
I know I haven't done much level 3 teaching, but level 2, the attendance has been improved compared to in person, from what Nancy said about mind, brain, and development, which is a second year module. But that one, I mean, that's more practical based. So I do think that they're probably missing out a bit more on the with the being in the lab and doing some of the more lab type stuff. It's not essential practical stuff, but it's a little bit more
so you couldn't get
hands-on
into the post-Christmas practical based course envelope.
No, we're still out completely online, and it looks like we are staying that way. So we've got plans to do things on campus if we get a bit more guidance, to let the first years, our psychology technician was showing them, here's the bio pack, here's some of the kit we have, and they said, oh, be nice if we could use it and and see it. So, and at first we was like, well, we'll do it induction next year. We'll have a big lab day. So, they've got a whole practical plan if we're allowed to go back and people can try out some of the equipment and stuff. And, we've got plans to do things that are tied to, I mean, the good thing about psychology is you can tie anything to psychology, but the students now are doing developmental psychology. So other than just seeing my child who doing tasks and answering questions, we were saying, we could do a forest school, and we could talk about how forest school encourages different areas of child development, and why schools do them, why young kids do them, and we could do it outside. We don't have to worry about some of the inside risks and stuff, but it's just the practical planning of it all. It's I think that's been the hardest thing about pivoting, is having to pivot quickly, and all the various bits of planning and risk assessments and staffing and things like that have to be done quickly when you've got students all over the country, but you've got staff all over the country. We've got a lot of our staff.
Yeah, because there's some people that used to commute quite a long way. I struggled with that a bit with, I don't know if it was constantly pushing back the date in my mind. So, we knew that it was going to be online stuff from block 0. And thankfully I didn't have many practicals in semester one that I was in charge of, that I had to develop as online alternatives. So I was kind of waiting for I was like, I'm sure it's going to be a bit different after Christmas, so I'll figure out if we don't come back on campus at all after Christmas, then I'll figure out how to do it online then. And I just kept pushing it and pushing it, thinking it'd be fine. I'm going to figure out how to do anatomy online and make it exciting until after this and after that. And then, of course, we didn't come back, and I was like, oh man, I've got to think real quick now how to, I really procrastinated like a piece of coursework.
Yeah.
I'll leave it to the deadline. It'll be fine. So that was quite a struggle, because it's figuring out, well, how do we, because we have the biopacks as well. And I was like, well, how the devil do you, if you're normally taking physiological measurements of people and they've got to be close to one another, how am I going to do that when they're not even in the same room and we can't use the kit? And even if we're on campus, we can't use the kit because it's in a lab that's being used for hot desking rather than as a lab. And that kit can't be moved. And oh my God, and unfortunately we didn't have the, like a lot of the Glenside, like the health courses, like nursing, midwifery and physio and stuff, that have a legal requirement to pass competencies.
Yeah.
Gives you the justification for being physically closer when you are in, whereas we had to stick with, well, the law's not making you do this practical because you're not going to be, treating people, so therefore you've got to stay 2 meters apart. Now, what are we going to do? Have a really long ECG lead going, the peak looks good from here, So we had to drop a lot of that stuff, and it made it really hard. And I've got, like you said, I've got ideas for if we come back. Because obviously being a practical based course, we've been back a bit, but not for any classes or anything. And I thought, well, if some of the, normally I have 250 of them in 2B25, the big 300-seater lecture theatre on a Wednesday morning. And I'd had this idea for what's now called hybrid delivery back in August, I think, where I thought, well, if I can get a sign up of students in, of a certain number, like we can fit, say, 50 into the room socially distanced, 50 sign up, and then I'll stream to the rest and record it. And that way we can have some people in and I can teach live in the room rather than wave my hands a lot more frantically than I normally would, just to be in frame. And then, but because there were some courses that were having their entire module cohorts in much bigger spaces so they could be socially distanced, it meant that my lecture theatre was being used for a completely different module that doesn't normally use that space during my slot. I was like, oh, so I can't do that because now it's being used by a module of 60, only 20 of which are probably showing up, but it's now out of bounds. And then I thought, but practical. So this was sort of last month. I thought, well, practical courses are the only ones in now, which means after Easter there may be some back, but it's worth investigating whether they're going to use that space if they come back, or if they're going to stick to online because it's only 3 weeks left, because that way I could do this hybrid thing. But then I ran into another barrier of you can't stream to people if they can't hear you, and they can't hear you if you don't have a mic. And because the radio mics aren't COVID secure, you can't use them, which means you've got to stay by the podium, which is the same thing as me sitting in my study at home, because I'm not moving in order to get the recording to people. I was like, right, well, I'm not going to go all the way in there and make 60 of them sign up and drag them in if I've got to stand stock still anyway, just so that the people aren't there can hear me. And it seemed like, well, that's not the experience they're looking for.
Yeah.
It's not going to be good for them in the room. So there's been a lot of that pivot leading to new ideas, but then other barriers get in the way of those ideas, like the practical stuff. That's been really hard.
I mean, I haven't even taught on campus because most of my teaching's this semester. And, but, when we were trying to plan some of this stuff in at the beginning of the year, it was like, how are we going to run this in the big lecture theater with everyone, socially distanced? And at some point, I think they were putting things on Padlet, and they were using online. They were doing things online, but in the same room. And it's kind of like, how much value is it sharing that space and seeing each other? And
if they're still doing it digitally,
if they're still doing everything online.
It's kind of like when we do this in a bit now that we've got multiple echo dots around the house. And so instead of shouting around the house, kids, dinner time, we just get her to announce it to people.
Yeah.
But my daughter's now started dropping in on the kitchen one from her room to tell us something, and you're like, oh my God, you're so lazy that you're using digital communication rather than come downstairs from your room to tell us something. And it seems that way with students, where they'll be sort of, it's almost like they're instant messaging in the room, going, did you get that? Yeah, I got that. You know, did you get the email I just sent from 10 feet away? You know, like it's a weird communication.
My husband will do that. He'll send me a link to something, and he's like, in the same room. And obviously it's a link, so he can't just tell me, but he wants me to click on read some article. But sometimes he does it, and he doesn't even tell me he's sending it to me. And I said, like, I get the phone, I'm like, oh, who sent me? Oh, you.
Every now and then, if you sort of ask, was, like you hear a buzz in the room, you go, was that you? Yeah, it was me. Oh, I'll get it later then. It's not that important. So how have you two found, because you're in the loft conversion, and is that like a shared office for the two of you, or have you got your own study spaces?
No, we really, fortunately, we had already planned to make two spaces because we had everything. We've got a lot of lockdown cliches in my house. So
Did you get a dog?
We got a dog.
You did? Oh my God, I was joking.
Why don't we add some chaos to the mix? We had a loft conversion, which was planned before the lockdown. We got a dog, which had been planned before the lockdown. We got a camper van, which was already bought and planned before the lockdown. The trampoline was new. The trampoline, I think, was the only lockdown cliche.
That was a necessity.
But yeah, we have. So we're in a 3-bed, normal, like a 3-bed semi-detached that has 2 rooms and a box room downstairs, 1 bathroom. And with the space above, we had enough for like maybe 1 big room with an ensuite, but we decided that it would be better to make it into 2 rooms so we could keep one we were thinking more like storage, just because we were losing the loft storage. Okay. And then a separate bathroom. But as it turned out, because we want to be on the same floor as our daughter until she gets a bit older, the 2 rooms upstairs are both office rooms now. So my husband's he's in the office next door, and he's kind of like it's kind of a mix of, eventually it'll be our bedroom. For now, it's his office, and it's the guest room. Not that we have any guests, but, there's wardrobes in there, so it's more storage in there as well. And then
so he ended up with the room. So you got to choose the decoration of your study, because that's going to be a study, whereas he was, even though it's a brand new room, he's like, why do I still have the back bedroom like the rest of the world?
He's got like the laundry hanging, and because it's bigger, but so mine's smaller, but I can make it more permanent, which is good. And also I'm shorter, so I don't hit the ceiling as much, because and if you can tell, but it's,
you can go more to the eaves, can't you?
It's quite slanty. Yeah, I'm basically in most of this room is like eaves.
That's quite lucky. Actually, I mean, I'm lucky. Well, we're very lucky with this house, and I'm up on the 2nd floor that has a single dormer loft conversion on the back half from the early 80s, I think it was. So there's stairs coming up. So this is like, and this was always my permanent space. So this was always going to be my study, or as my wife sort of calls it, the room where she makes me put things that she doesn't like that are mine. Hence the Spider-Man posters and that sort of stuff. But it makes it quite a nice small permanent space, which is quite lucky. But it did make it. My wife is a community physio, and she is still seeing patients all the time. So she's had to have the old dining room table situation. It's just an easier big space for her to use, and that's in the open plan family space. So when there's been moments of our eldest going ballistic, she has to endure that more than I do, because of just being in the more common space that people can go through, whereas I'm relatively isolated up here. But like we said earlier, the team's noise cancellation is fantastic, because I was in a ward board, and it was my first one, having only been program lead for a year at that point, and it was my turn. So it'd been like, an hour of me not having to say anything. And it got to my point, and it was at that moment, and it was a Friday, which is my youngest's non-nursery day. And my wife does 5 days in 4 so that she can have Fridays off. And it was at that point that both the children decided to, I think, murder one another. It was and eventually Jerry had to, so I unmuted, went to say my bit, and Jerry went, is that Lucy? Do you want to go check on them? And I'm sure it'll be fine. Emma will deal with that. With just this shrieking going in the background. You're like, this is my life now. This, mental patients behind me. But then they added the noise suppression thing. I was like, let's crank that all the way up so no one can hear when they go crazy in the background.
That's a great tip. I haven't, yeah. I mean, sometimes it's usually now it's a bit quiet, but sometimes there's dog barking and all kinds of things going on. Work's still being done here. I've only been in the loft since probably February or so, that it was done with carpeting and all of that after it was done. So I was in the dining room before that, or living room, dining room, and lots of Amazon deliveries and dogs and just
lots of
occasional child
saying to, like, in the middle of the class, oh, just a moment, Amazon's at the door again, and having to go and which you can't do in a normal thing. Have you found all that quite hard, the not being able to just do the job or do the class? It's more interruptions and all the connectivity issues and stuff like that. Have you found that quite frustrating, that's made it less enjoyable to do the teaching, or have you found it more relaxed being at home doing it?
I think now that I've got this space up here, it's been better. And then we got a mesh system put in, so that's helped with some of the connectivity stuff, because that was really annoying. And it was like my husband and I, if we were both on Teams at the same time sometimes. So he's a solicitor and does have, he was in the first lockdown, especially because he's got billable hours. He's got, clients that have more strict kind of hours they keep than maybe your average academic. And so I was taking a lot of night shifts, which was, it was just, okay, Frey's gone to bed. It's time to work. Time to start my day.
Well, we had that a lot, didn't we? With lots of people saying they quite welcome the idea of working when they wanted, but you still had that issue of people replying to student emails at night time, which then sets the precedent for my lecturer will reply to me then. But a lot of people had to do it because of husbands or kids.
I ended up putting a note on my email that just said, I'm answering at night because of childcare. I don't have any expectation of anybody else doing this kind of thing, But I know sometimes, because I know one of my hits, Ahad said that about getting emails from me at 3 a.m. sometimes and stuff. Just makes me sound like much more of a martyr than it actually was. But
Ben, I suppose if you do, because you can do the delay send, which I've been doing a bit, like if it's 5:45, and so I've sort of finished for the day, but and it's a quick one, I'll do the delay send so it'll arrive the next morning, and that's quite useful. But then that doesn't help people that have to work in the night time, because if you do the delay send for a bunch of stuff so that no one feels compelled first thing in the morning with this raft of emails, they're going to reply to you, and of course you're going to be thinking, I can't do anything about this until 8 o'clock tonight, so that's going to make me seem like I'm not in the same way. So that's been quite difficult, I think, different patterns aligning.
I did one thing that's nice about working at night is you're not getting constant emails while you're working. So, it's they're kind of all just sitting there waiting for you, and you can, deal with what you have to, or pin the rest or whatever. But I find, now that I'm working more in the day, again, it's hard. You start doing something, then an email comes in, and then, I don't know, this might just be me getting distracted easily with stuff. But at night it was kind of like, okay, emails are done for the day. I'm going to do a big solid chunk of marking or prepping some sort of teaching, or answering some specific, doing a draft of a dissertation, and you could focus a little bit better at night when not everybody. It's kind of like, being on campus. I would say wasted time. I think there's a lot of value in it, but a lot of standing in the staff room chatting to somebody, popping into someone's office and ending up in their office for an hour talking to them and their office mate about this and that and stuff. And I do miss that aspect of the community, and I feel bad for all we've got a lot of new staff now who are meeting everyone.
They've
started during this online teaching, so they don't have that kind of opportunity where we can remember people from the chats we had in the kitchen or whatever. But yeah, I think that it's been more like solid work. There's been none of this chit chatting.
You're right, actually, because I used to, I still drink the same amount of coffee, but I tend to empty the coffee pot into a thermos and come up for morning coffee with the same friends that I used to go to Xbox with every morning when I got in. So we still do a team sync every day. But I used to mid-morning go, I'm bored of the thing that I'm doing now, or I'm a bit brain dead. I'll go get a coffee, and if I'm lucky, I'll bump into someone and I'll
Oh
waste some
yeah.
time talking to them. Whereas now you're like, should I even bother going downstairs? Because there's no one there to talk to. It's just me rambling around the house. So you end up just sat down for so much longer, which
Yeah.
is more productive, but it's definitely more draining. I've got less willpower to do anything else. I should go for a run, and I've fallen into this trap. But it's not going anywhere because I used to run to work, so there's a point to it. Whereas now you're like, yeah, but I'm running in a direction to then run back. I could just stay where I am. That seems to be achieving the same goal of running away and back. There's nothing at the other end of it, like the commute to work. So the will to do anything other than get the work done and then immediately transition into going downstairs and I'm cooking someone's tea or whatever, you go straight into daddy mode. That's been a bit of a
Yeah. I miss the commute. I miss that, the commute was pretty horrible when it was traffic, but it was kind of a space between work and
decompression, as it were. Yeah.
leaving it behind.
So you've just been, like I say, you've been doing more nighttime, but have you been plowing through at night have you found you've been doing more hours because you don't realize that you've cracked on till midnight? You're meant to stop at 10, but there's, no end of the day, as it were.
Yeah, I don't do it as much anymore now that, I mean, now that Freya's at school. What I've done is I've ended up doing a working pattern where I work when she's in school. And then I've got Friday, because my husband's off on Fridays, I've got more of an extended Friday. And then I usually have maybe 1 or 2 nights in the week where I work in the evening to kind of make up the hours of the after school time. And filling in the gaps like that. And it's probably less hours actually overall technically, but because I'm not standing in somebody's office chatting, it probably equals out. So
Actually, that
walking
is,
across campus to X block to get a coffee, I guess it's closer to go downstairs. So
we sort of pick I could go to, oh God, I've even forgotten what it's called, One Zone, but X Block is further and I feel I need the walk. It was always that excuse, wasn't it?
And my research is just, my main research area has been really put on hold. So it's like it's a very COVID unfriendly research area to study, which is intergenerational contact. And so I was doing research with play groups at care homes and the retirement village, which, nobody's, even family members now are barely allowed to go into care homes, never mind bringing in a group of children in for a play group. So
mobile petri dishes, really.
So that all just kind of ended very swiftly. And but yeah, that's and I'm also the placement coordinator. So the placements, what the good thing about placement coordination stuff is usually that is not set teaching time, so that can be done here, there, and everywhere as well. But yeah, so now I think it's more concentrated work. It's been and more regimented. So in a day I might have been a little bit more, oh, I'll do this for a bit and then I'll do this for a bit, and now I didn't get around to that, but I'll do that later. Now it's kind of like I have to do this and have everything planned out a bit more, which really goes against the way I like to work. So
do you think you'll not carry that forward as much when you're back a bit more? Like as soon as we're back, do you think you'll do a day working from home so that you can have a day of knock everything out in a concentrated period, or will you go fully back to being among people as much as possible and in every day, even if you've not got a scheduled class?
I think that in some ways it's probably going to work to my advantage of being able to have a good balance of Freya being at school. And, I think that we haven't been putting her in the wraparound care. in reception. So I think that, we'll probably be able to figure out like when she's going to be doing after school stuff or, breakfast club and that sort of thing. But ultimately, I think it maybe gives me a bit more flexibility. Like in the past, I felt the need to be at work until about 5:30, whereas now I feel like I could knock off for the day and pick her up from school and go home and say, I'm gonna do more work in the evening after she goes to bed. That just seems like a bit more, I don't know, socially acceptable now to work that way.
Yeah, and it breaks up the day a bit more, by having stuff in there. I don't know, maybe stuff you'll do a morning on campus because you've got something scheduled, but then go home in the afternoon because you've got to be at school for 3:15 anyway, have a couple of hours off,
Yeah.
and then do a couple of hours in the evening. So it all makes up for it. I mean, that's the good thing about in our working environment we've always had. It's as long as you get the work done, we don't much care. It's a lot harder for professional services that actually have that flexi time thing, don't they, where they have to log they've left a couple hours early and you make that up another time, whereas we've got so much more freedom. Must have been
That's
a lot
what my husband works. He's like, he gets some notifications when I've been on his laptop, like, are you recording his hours? Because sometimes what he's doing is billable to clients, so he has to really keep track of it, whereas for me, I'm kind of like, here's a new, I'm doing a lecture, and if I quite like putting together a lecture. So if I'm doing it for 4 hours, I don't really mind doing that in the evening. So it's kind of figuring out, what do I like? What can I mentally still take in the evening, or what do I like doing in the evening versus there is absolutely no way I'm going to sit here and, I don't know, find some tedious task of like, filling out some kind of action plan or something.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. You would pick but I suppose that's quite hard because you need to put off till the evening the thing that you like doing. But equally, you don't want to spend the day doing the really boring stuff. I'll do a bit of that lecture writing now, or whatever it might be. So it kind of chips away. So yeah, I suppose there's the need for strict structure, even in a flexible environment, just for your own sanity, I guess. Actually, speaking of sanity, because that's what the second hour with the students tipped over into about. We were talking about how has your mental well-being been, based on what they were telling me about how useful it's been being at uni, even if they've not been in, but moving to Bristol and this sort of thing. And they suddenly flipped it and went, yeah, it's not great. And I was like, wow, that I would not, based on how positive they found moving to Bristol, I wouldn't have thought they'd have been hit as hard. But it turns out it is, under the surface, still as crap for everybody else. Yeah. So have you struggled with that balance a bit as well? Like low days and high days, or has it been?
Yeah, I think so. It's been, and I think, I was worried about like what kind of parent I was being too, because I felt like I was being really inconsistent. And, in the lockdown times, I come from a child development background. So I've worked in nurseries, I've run play groups, I know a lot about child development, especially the age my daughter is. So some days it would be like an all singing, all dancing kind of, aren't I like the most engaged mummy ever? We're gonna have so much fun. We're going on this adventure.
You're putting on everything from your background. You're like, I've got a whole chest full of child development usefulness here.
Yeah. And then some days it's kind of like me staring at my phone going, oh, will you just leave me alone and go watch TV? It's just, I think the inconsistency probably has not been good. When my daughter started reception, we have a meeting with the teacher, and like before, and he was like, oh, how's lockdown been? Is there anything I should know and everything? And I was like, she's learned some really bad words. She's been with her parents quite a lot, and
things have slipped. Yeah.
If she throws out certain swear words, then we apologize in advance.
I found it became really important to find alternatives that were close enough. So coming words like chuffing was a favorite of mine to throw out as an alternative to any swear, because it sounds innocent.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think, sometimes you feel like you're so busy for so long that you don't even have time to pause and think about, is it an up day or is it a low day? And then then it kind of hits you all at once, but I think the isolation bit, I've realized that I probably like more than I thought I would, because I always think of myself as being like, quite extroverted and social, but I don't know.
Less of it, more of a, not like it's a performance, but you do find actually you like the time to yourself more than you originally thought. Yeah.
I think, sometimes I think when I get in seminars, because we do a lot of team teaching with seminars too, which is nice because you can kind of bounce off each other and have a bit of a discussion. You're not just throwing questions out to the void ever. And I sometimes I get so excited, we just run out of time every single time, because I'm like, oh, isn't this fun having a chat just like we are right now? It's like, oh, having a chat with someone. But like I think we had, in the autumn, it was definitely rougher because the new schooling had started. Freya had started school. The new uni weird year had started. My mother-in-law passed away as well, so that was like a big family event that went on. Right around the same time we got the puppy. The house, we constantly had tradespeople in and out of the house for the loft conversion, and it was just, I don't know, I think it got so overwhelming that it was almost like canceled everything out and just kind of like, okay, we'll just get through it.
Yeah, I suppose that there was that less isolation than you thought, because there was suddenly so much going on and so many people in and out that you're just sort of going, it'll get better. But then I suppose it's what stuff we're carrying through to next year. Like, are we leaving behind the bad stuff and taking forward the good stuff? So like I say, that bouncing off one another in a seminar room is going to feel, for a while at least, when we're back, it'll feel you'll feel exuberant again when you're doing it. But then once you I don't know if that enjoying the isolation a bit, being able to just, right, cameras off and it's back to me, whether people will crave that a bit more, because we'll be back to, at any moment someone could knock on the door.
I feel like the seminars that we've had too, I almost feel like, we might have 45 students watch in the seminar, and some of them are interacting and stuff, but they're generally not on camera. And and I almost feel like I'm some kind of podcast host, with the other seminar leader, and it's like an interactive podcast or something. And like, these are students I haven't met in person, and I just, most of them, and because sometimes I live in fish ponds, and it's quite close to campus, and a lot of students are around here, and I think all these students know who I am.
You don't know them.
I don't know who they are. They could be, sitting sometimes I pass like a group of students sitting in the park, and I'm, probably my dog and my child are both misbehaving at the same time, and I'm yelling at them, and I think, are those my students? Do they know who I am?
I'll think that if we have to go to the Filton Abbey Wood, and if I'm taking one of the kids, be like, now bear in mind, anyone in this particular ASDA could be one of my students, but I wouldn't know it, because if they're first years, I haven't met them properly yet. So don't do anything where I'm going to look really bad, just because they've got anonymity and I don't.
Yeah. I had that. And the students work sometimes in the supermarket. So like one of our students was working in the co-op on the Straits Parade and Fish Ponds, which we go pop in quite a lot, especially with Freya, because usually like on the way back from the park or something. And I think I was kind of in the middle of a parenting, okay, I'll get you chocolate, just be quiet, or something like that. And then it was like, oh, hi, you're one of my psychology lectures.
And you're like, yes, and this is the exact way to get a child quiet. Promise them chocolate.
Yeah. Especially teaching child development specifically. It looks especially bad, I think.
Yeah. And they're like using that in a case study later, going, well, you said it was all right to do that when I saw you.
Yeah, she's got a PhD in child development, so it must be okay to bribe your child.
Surely she wouldn't go off the recommended for her own kid.
But I think it'll be weird to be in the classroom next year with, like, a lot of the students, I know their names, and I know, I've had a lot of email communication with them, or they've been active in the chats, or they've been on the discussion board. But yeah, I'd pass them in the hallway and I'd have no idea who they were. Yet I feel like they probably feel like they know me quite a lot. And I make videos for them every week. we've got like a weekly newsletter, and my cats and dog and child are always popping in, and various things, and so it's almost like it's like a window into my home, or like, oh, here's the loft conversion, here's my house, and it's just
Yeah, I think one of my videos I do, instead of announcements on Blackboard, I do video updates sort of every couple of days or so, or once a week, and that goes in the thingy. And there was one in particular where where I sort of said, afternoon everyone, it's such and such a time. This is take 9, I think, because my children will not be quiet. And I thought, because at this point they know that there's kids running around and whatnot, and that's the normal thing for them. You're right about some of them put their cameras on, which is great. And so I've got to know quite a few of them. And there's a lot of names I'll recognize as those that clearly type or they email or whatever it will be. And some of them, thankfully, have changed their profile picture on their Outlook to them. Some do it to just an image. You think, well, that's of no use. The background of the sea, that doesn't tell me what you look like. But so it's their thing. Right, so I have an idea as to who you are, even though you've never been on camera. And I often feel like my engagement, I don't find it that useful because the feeds into it aren't consistent,
Yeah.
But that could do with having a picture, because it takes like 20 minutes for ISIS to connect and log in, to then painfully find them and go, oh, that's what you look like. So something more instant with a picture, because at least when you get an email, you kind of go, the name sounds familiar, but there's 9 Sophies or whatever. Which one was that? Was that the one with the thing? And then so I think that really helps. So I've updated my profile picture, I think just because I'm more grey now. It just seemed more realistic, just so that they know what I look like, even if when you go to sharing screen, your camera basically goes to a thumbnail and they can't see you. So I thought visual presence everywhere is quite important to them, but we need it from them as well. Otherwise, they're just blank faces. It's just like an initial, isn't it, in a circle? If there's no
they're on Teams, it is just their initials. And I've had that, even my dissertation students, I've had that where I've just been talking to initials that kind of pulse as they talk.
It's quite, it takes you out of the moment if you're not, which is why I lecture on Teams, even though we weren't supposed to for the longest while. So I did it a bit, but it means that I can put the video on my tablet in front of me, the presentation in front of me, and share that with them, but still have the video wall on my big monitor, so I can actually play off of them. Because when it's just a bunch of initials or nothing, like Collaborate, where the presentation dominates the screen, you feel like you're doing the podcast thing just really, really badly because no one else is saying anything. I'll be like, I'll tell a joke and I think I've no idea if that's falling flat or not, because I can't even see their faces, and I've asked them all to mute their mics. I should kind of.
I think I told a joke once and my internet had been dropped out.
And of course, you can't tell it again. It's like explaining why the joke is funny. It's not funny the second time. You can't kind of go, we're back, everyone. I'm going to tell it again because I don't think some of you got it the first time. It's not going to work. It was like, I used to find it quite depressing watching, well, not even watching, but like a Panopto recording done as backup. You're in the room and you do the Panopto just for them to revisit, hopefully, rather than watch as their only interaction because they didn't show up. And of course, there's a mic on me in the room, but there's no mics above the students. When they laugh, it doesn't pick that up. So on a recording, when I tell a joke, it seems like no one found it funny, and that's quite sad. No, that was damn funny. They were all like,
probably even sadder too, because you probably had laughter, so you had to pause and wait for the laughter to die down.
Exactly.
So instead, it even sounds like probably you're just sitting there waiting for them to laugh.
That's just it, yeah. But then they
a laugh track, like an old sitcom.
In front of a studio audience type thing.
Press a button.
I could add that in afterwards, I suppose. Just add a little audio track to the Panopto. Yeah. But that interaction definitely affects, or lack of, I think. Like, I try my best, but I did say to them a couple of lectures ago, I was like, this is like 30% of my capability, because I don't know who's picking up on stuff and what I need to explain more about, and I'm having to do everything in this frame, and I can't roam and all that sort of stuff. So it definitely feels like it's making the delivery less engaging and less, it's more about the content, which makes it a bit more asynchronous. So I can see why you guys have maintained an asynchronous content delivery and then do the seminar online, a bit like we do with Lecture Week, Practical Week. But I think it will make more of a difference when we're back in, whether we do more active learning rather than just broadcast or not, because it's going to vary based on module to module. So have you had any thoughts on how you might incorporate more of that? Are you guys coming up with some ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I think ours really depends on the module, because we have, some modules is very much, yeah, I mean, like I think about like when I do a lecture, there's no point in me running down just describing the information that's in their textbook. You know what I mean? Like, here's Piaget's theory. Here's the slide that shows his stages. Here's the first stage and what it's like. Here's the second stage. So I like having my lectures just to be more like, this is how I understand these theories fitting in. This is how I've made sense of them. This is how they relate to some other theories, or and so it's I feel like it's more conceptual, but again, that doesn't always jive with, well, the multiple choice is going to ask me what's his first stage in his theory.
Yeah,
You know what I
exactly.
mean? So I just want to know that, that's what I want to read on the slide. So so I think that it's given a good opportunity to maybe look at some of these things. And then we've got, the statistics module, or the research analysis module, where the students really want a lot more. They need to be sitting at the computer doing it with people helping them when they get stuck, which is a very different kind of experience than being in a seminar and let's all look at this questionnaire and talk about how it's done, or how it measures this psychological construct, or here's a debate in psychology, and maybe talk about in groups some kind of more theoretical type of discussion. And because we've had some conversations with some of the other social sciences, and we're a little bit different, I think, because we are kind of a mix of topics that are a little bit more towards sociology, philosophy, and then topics that are more towards the other sciences, where it's
You
this
got
is
more
how.
quantitative and qualitative, whereas social is
Yeah,
a bit more qualitative. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's a very varied subject. So I think a lot of it's really going to depend on what makes sense for each module, which is hard because we've always tried a very one size fits all type of approach for how we structure the lecture seminar, lecture workshop. I think that in the first year we probably will keep a lot of the I mean, what we've asked the students is, what do you want? And they basically want it all. So they we want lots of interactive things and everything's still recorded. Is, the
Yeah.
feedback that we've had. And if I miss something, there's still something online that I can catch up, that kind of thing. So, but I think that we will probably keep a lot of the one-way delivery to be asynchronous and to be online. It varies by level too. So like the first years, I think quite like it, having the asynchronous stuff that they can do in their own time, because they've developed those working patterns now. Whereas I think the second year is like more of the lectorials, we're going to do a live lecture online.
But with
And
expected discussion. I think lectorial's almost we're going to start using it a lot more, aren't we?
yeah,
Even if it's to justify being one person in a sea of people, because I think maybe that's where some of the problems come from, because a good lecture is a lectorial. Otherwise, it is just sage on the stage going, well, I'm going to, and you're like, yeah, we just Googled all that, man. What else you got? So,
yeah.
so
I
I
read
think we're
that in
going
the
to
book.
be doing a lot more of that. I mean, I tried last year, no, year before last, 2019, with the whole, because they said for years 3 hours is too long, and I'm asleep after the second hour, or we have a break after each hour or whatever, and at the start of the third hour I don't come back because I'm already brain dead, so I wouldn't take it in. I know it's being recorded, so I'll catch it up later. And so I said, well, let's have a look at what we can do. Maybe, and I put out a model of 90 minutes twice a week on a module rather than 3 hours in one go, because that way you've got a couple days in between to catch up or whatnot. And almost over, they say, oh, we'd love that. Problem is, I don't want to have to come in twice
Yeah.
a week. or it's only 90 minutes and that's a long way to come in. And you think, well, but there's two modules on that day, so you've got 90 minutes then and 90 minutes then, so you're coming in for more than one thing. Yeah, but what if I've got a part-time job? Right, okay, so you don't like 3-hour lectures, but equally you've got no other solutions. So now we're looking
we
at
always
this.
have that problem with PAL. It's kind of like, oh, I can't go to PAL. I've got too much going on that day. And then it's, well, I'm also not going to come in just for PAL.
Just for PAL, exactly. Yeah, it's only an hour, so why would I come all that way? And you're like, oh, for God's sake. So I've asked my lot. I've had about 170 responses so far. This is asking 3 levels, though, so about 500 students. Here are a whole range of ways we could deliver stuff to you. Synchronous, asynchronous, and what would you prefer? Just to get a sense of, let's ask you for a change rather than me assume. Because I turned 41 a couple of weeks ago, or a week ago, whatever it was. I am in no way relatable to you. I'm back in the day where we just used to come to class, write stuff down. At some point, there'd be an assessment, and at some point, it would be marked, and we would just accept the mark and we would move on.
Yeah.
And life isn't like that anymore, so I can't pretend to guess what they'd like. So, put this forms thing out, and what do you like? Here's a whole range of stuff. And one thing I put out was, how about 2 hours one day and then an hour another day, and whether that third hour on the other day is for more of a tutorial, a let's use what we learned in the 2 hours, or it's a third hour thing, but you've had a couple of days to digest a bit the first 2 hours and catch up with your notes. And it would all be recorded and it would all be streamed. And they seem to prefer that idea of the 2 and 1, where if you choose not to come in, it will still be live, so you can engage online, but it will be recorded anyway. So if you're working or you just don't care or whatever it might be, the recording's there for you to catch up on. But then the other thing that's coming out of it is, would you actually come in for the third hour? The third hour, 2 days later, was where you're going to use, I'm not going to be telling you anything. It's going to be for you to use the first two, the recording, whatever it might be, in more of a group thing or a seminar type thing. If you hadn't managed to get around to watching that recording and making notes so that you understood it to apply it, would you come in? They're like, oh, no, Lord, no, wouldn't come in. If I'm behind at all, why would I come in for a thing where I've got to use something that I don't yet know because I got behind? So that's a bit of a worry, that as we come back and we do change out of the telling them stuff, which of course they're thinking, as you said, question 1 on the MCQ is going to be this, or there might be an essay topic or whatever it might be. Would they come in if they find that their time management hasn't improved to the point where they are catching up in between? That in between time is going to become more important, I think.
Yeah.
We're going to struggle to balance that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that different than what we had. And yeah, I think sometimes we did have students that didn't come to the seminar because they missed the lecture, and they come to the seminar and it's, you kind of throw out a question. So what did everyone think of this? And you just kind of get blank stares, and
Exactly.
that's when you do the second mini lecture,
Try and coax it out of them. Yeah. Well, like you say, we have an online course that it's an apprenticeship we've had for years, and they get all the content asynchronously and always have, but they have every fortnight a collaborate tutorial. And it's supposed to be, originally designed to be email you questions ahead of time about the thing, and then we'll go over them as topics of discussion. But more and more it's come to, so who's managed to watch the recording? And they're like, I haven't got around to it yet. Or, yeah, I've watched about 10 minutes and then had to go back to work or whatever it was, or haven't quite caught up. And you go, so what would you want to discuss? Well, can you go over that bit again? Yeah, no, the point of this isn't to go over the thing again. You can literally rewind and watch it again. And it would just be me describing the same thing 3 or 4 different ways. So there's that again of making sure it's clear to students. Now, this is active learning. I'm facilitating now. I'm kind of running the room, but you're doing the work. The emphasis is on you doing all the heavy lifting and making sure they engage with that. And that's going to be quite a challenge to us, I think. But it sounds like you've got a bit of that already, and you have done for a while.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to tell, because sometimes in a cohort of, or, we've got the minors in there as well, but like in a class of 350, I think we've got 330 students on it now, you could have 100 students that are really, really engaged. And it seems like, oh yeah, these students are really getting it. These students are really great. These students love in psychology. These students are showing up. There's still a lot of students that no idea what's going on with them, they're just, it's really hard to tell in if they're not coming. I think like in a lecture theater, you can look out and see, okay, there's not many people in this lecture. But I think that with the asynchronous, it's hard to know who's engaging with it, how they're engaging with it, you know, and when we're getting feedback back from students, it's never a big percentage. You know, the module evaluations are always really low percentages. The you know, throwing out surveys, student reps canvassing students. I feel like it's still missing a lot of people that I'm not sure what they're doing. And I think some students, I think it's really going to depend on level, because I think some of the first years really have gotten into a very distance learning type of pattern where they're like, you know what, I could probably do this and work full time, or, you know, live in my hometown, or you know.
Yeah, saving a fortune there. Yeah, I mean, I suppose that there is particularly with uncapped resits, which is by and large a good thing, because it means we have to think differently about assessment, because what we don't want is resits being where the bulk of students do their assessment and go, oh, well, I'll do it that time. Because if you make the assessment something that's doable but still robust in the first sit, they'll do it then. They won't kind of I'll leave it to the next one, or pick and choose. But I think as there is that uncapped resit opportunity where there's less pressure on cramming everything into one space, you can go, well, I can, you know, almost like working a ski season. I'll work solid at this job until Christmas, and then I'll catch up and start attending in semester 2. But I've got a big chunk saved, or, you know, whatever it might be. And there might be a bit of a shift in that, and mature students as well fitting things in.
Yeah, it's, I mean, just a coincidence, really, that a lot of our undergraduate leadership team is from North America. That we're
I've noticed that, yeah. It's like the expertise came over. Yeah.
But we're all used to, I think all of us were at least undergrads in the US or Canada, and we're used to being assessed more frequently but less stakes, you know. So we're used to, you know, hey, you've got an exam or a test every 3 weeks or something like that, on the stuff we've been doing for that 3 weeks. So, and then after that, you could forget it. You know, usually it's not cumulative. It doesn't you know, but so you can't really drop out for very long, because you'd miss you miss stuff. But, you know, you don't also, and like, as far as a well-being perspective goes, I think that you mess up one assessment, it's not so bad, because, you know, you've got a lot of opportunities for other things to make up for it. But and so, like, for us, it makes sense for us to assess that way. But the actual practical aspects and how the university is set up, and the components and the elements and the and ISIS and all those things are set up, it doesn't really, it's not very compatible sometimes. And I don't know if it's compatible with student expectations and their lifestyles either. Because, you know, I mean, I've tried to do that this year, where I've broken down our multiple choice. They've got 4 multiple choice exams now. And the first one was in, you know, November. And, you know, they only started in October. And I think some of them were like, we're having a test, we're having an exam already, you know, oh my God. And I was like, it's 25%. It's,
yeah, we're not testing the whole year right now. Yeah. Although I'm quite cruel with mine. I've been doing it for about 3-4 years now, where they have monthly exams instead of end of semester, end of things, and it's only 30 minutes a time, so it adds up to a 3-hour exam over the year. But they get reassessed on stuff from last time, so a third of every 30-minute monthly exam is from all the previous ones, so that you can't just forget all that stuff once you've passed the thing. And so it's that, like you say, that same, you can drop out for a bit, and it's okay if this one doesn't go well, because you haven't failed it, because you can't fail a single one. You can only fail the cumulative average, or not pass it, I suppose. So you can just pick up those, and it's to give them a bit more chance to boost their marks as they go. But I am cruel in that I go, yeah, but you can't put down lecture 1 now. You just glance at it. You've only got to glance every now and then, because you've been assessing it a couple of times, to keep them engaged all the time, so that they don't drop off. But like I say, it's not as high stakes, and that kind of helps, I think.
Yeah,
And it's
because
a
I think
best of situation.
some of them have said that they feel much, the whole going to the ECC and sitting in a big group with a bunch of people and doing an exam for a couple hours, they feel much more relaxed doing things like that at home,
Yeah,
whether
yeah.
that's multiple choice or the essay exam, so I think that some of the students that have had some of the exam anxiety have benefited. I always thrived on exam anxiety, so I think I probably
Puts you in that focused position. I suppose for them, I kind of like the idea of being able to choose when you start it in the day. That's quite handy. So
yeah.
that's a good thing to come out. But you're right about the regulations, that it's sort of in our gift to change things, but until we either get looser with the regs that they're more malleable, or whether, I don't know, well, we can't throw them out the window, but they almost have to be defined a bit more, don't they? So that you don't have to hide formative assessments or multiple assessments within a component. Okay, it's a component, but it's really like 9 things, there has to be that
It's a
sort of,
portfolio, but it's,
exactly, yeah, but there's 47 items in it, and they're like, what, yeah, but they're tiny, and you go, oh, so we need to be more have the regulations be more adaptive. I think as long as there's a principle they align to, that's the only way we're going to make all these changes that are being suggested as useful.
Well, I know in the US we've got when I've taught in the US, and mostly I was teaching as a PhD student, but I you get you don't have the central regulations in a way, so you're kind of like you're the queen of your module, and you can do whatever you want. It's like, oh, I'm gonna have a pop test today, I'm gonna I'm gonna have an exam next
No
week,
one
and
can complain. Oh, that's too much power. Too
just,
much power.
but the problem is with that is that you've got you get a lot of well, with your Spider-Man poster, you've got it with your power becomes your responsibility of things like
Exactly.
you have to get emails from students that say, oh, I missed this, can I have an extension? And you have to be the one that decides who gets an extension. Or I missed this, is there any way I can make it up? Or can I get some extra credit for something? And
You blur
so
the boundaries, don't you? Because at least
yeah.
you can go, no, that's an info point thing. You go do that there.
Yeah,
Takes
exactly.
a lot
So
of the pressure off it.
this is the regulation info point, student
Yeah.
advisor. Here's a form you fill out, but in the US it was, students coming up to you after a lecture. I was like, oh, my cat's been missing and I've been really stressed and I missed this exam. Is there any way I could take it tomorrow instead? That kind of
Yeah. And those are really hard to manage as well, because you get a lot of that come up, and all you can say is you can put in for an extension. I can't personally say that you'll get it because
yeah.
it's a week before, or I'm not quite sure what the criteria are, or whatever it might be. So I wouldn't want to lose that, I think, because
Yeah.
it put a lot of, my God, your future really is in my hands. Like, I'm supposed to be ushering you towards that future. Now I'm deciding every facet of it. That's
Yeah, and it's hard too because it's really, you get a lot of pressure where, oh, well, will so and so other lecturer let me do something, or
oh
and
yeah.
then you've got other students too. You think like, I'm rewarding the students that maybe have that confidence to ask for these things of me, but not the ones who don't,
Just
or
accept it. Yeah. It's like the ones that go, oh, but we have that with projects where you're not supposed to change anything in drafts. You can offer feedback and say, well, you might want to change that up, but you can't say how, and you're not supposed to write on it.
Mm.
But every year, someone will come up and say, oh, and it's supposed to be a week before the deadline is the last time you can accept a draft, because otherwise there's a lot of pressure on you to get something back to them the day before or whatever.
Yeah.
But every year, saying, oh, but thingies did that. And you go, well, bully for
Yeah.
them, but I don't want to be working at midnight just because you've given me this in the 13th hour. And the rule is this. So I think being able to say the rule is this, it's out of my hands, is important. It's the only level of standardization I would say is important. I prefer consistency over standardization, but at least where there are, now these are the rules, this is the law, and I can't do anything about it, because that way it's not entirely my responsibility to get you through. Because you'd have grade inflation, I guess. If it was more manipulatable by the individual module leader, there would be more, it would just end up going that way, wouldn't it? A bit bias skew with, oh, that was really great, so extra credit, or yeah, you can have another 3 weeks or whatever. It wouldn't be equitable for everyone, I suppose.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah. So maybe I do like the regulations a little bit.
Yeah, it is the one thing that, whenever I think, oh, I'm just gonna rip it up and do things how I want to do it, I think, oh no, actually,
Yeah, I need
then
someone
I have to do
back.
this other stuff.
Yeah, so I've got loads of ideas, but they need restraint in some places. I think that's quite important. Yeah. So it sounds like there's quite a lot of, I don't know, a lot of new stuff that's coming through, but we're going to need to be very careful what we do with it and who does it. And there's going to be a huge amount of upskilling as well. So that's going to be a big challenge for this year. So actually
Yeah,
on that,
I take it for granted because, because I have, I've worked for the Open University before, and I'm quite used to doing a lot of these online things. I really take it for granted. Then you get into a workshop or something, and someone says, like, at the beginning in the last summer, it was like, how do I mute something? What,
and
okay.
people always say, I'm now going to share my screen. Like, it needs to be announced. Brace yourselves, everyone. The screen's going to change. So on that, having gone, because there's the minor challenges that we've had with online learning, people love it now when I forget to unmute. Digital boy forgot to unmute. What a hilarious. So what would you say is going to be your biggest challenge starting this next academic year? Like, if we assume we're back and there may be masks, but you can be shoulder to shoulder again. What do you think is going to be the hardest thing?
I think I mean, right now, my biggest issue is trying to figure out the various alternate worlds of timetabling that we're thinking of.
Oh yeah.
But I think in an ideal world, it's kind of how do we now provide all of these, being everything for everyone and all their expectations, and not everyone get burnt out, basically. It's I think it's going to be hard to maybe drag some people back into campus again.
That's true. Yeah. Could be a lot of
Both students and
institutionalization.
staff.
Yeah. I think that might be the biggest thing. It's the not pivoting again, but it's gonna be a sudden change. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I think it's going to be I think we're in a good position in psychology because we've got so many new staff members that we've got a real good opportunity to kind of start afresh in some ways. But I think that there is like a real danger of getting rid of good stuff that works as well. Trying new things and new technology just because it's new and exciting when it doesn't actually, serve the right purpose. So
That's almost that's the path we've got to follow, I suppose. It's don't get distracted by the shiny thing if it's not right for the pedagogy. It's got to be right for the students and their experience, rather than, it's got to be not easy, but we have to be able to manage it rather than it become a burden.
Yeah.
I think,
And
it's the
just, I
balance.
mean, sometimes it's it's not very glamorous to have to answer students' emails about their assessment and, get your marking back in time. But, sometimes that has to take priority over learning a new way to, show your videos and, and make
Video editing skills or something. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's true. I suppose that's going to be, it almost comes with learning new things because they make other parts of the job easier, so that we have the headspace to try these new things and to test them properly. That's going to be important, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think, like, sometimes, we're in kind of a weird thing now where I think there's, some of the students have an expectation of like quite slick video editing type of polished thing. I'm making my asynchronous videos now, and I'm just like, if I was doing this in a lecture theater, I would just show up. Here's my slides. Here's the, lots of verbal fluency errors and mistakes, and and when I'm recording stuff, I feel like, oh, am I going to let that slide? I really need to start over.
Yeah, take 46. Yeah, I prefer the live thing that way. It's when you know that it's supposed to be right, there's more pressure to get it right. When you're in the room in the moment, it's whatever the moment makes of it, and that's more enjoyable. I wouldn't want to lose that.
Yeah. I know. I think, but yeah, I don't know. I think my asynchronous videos are probably, I'm definitely making them not on purpose, but making them so that they'll never be able to be used again. You know, they're not like a slick product that could be then transported to next year, or if somebody was teaching developmental psychology on the same topic in another university. They're very conversational. They're very, they're very just, yeah,
And they
trying
get
to make it
updated all
more
the
like
time.
they
That's
were
the
in
other
the
thing with
lecture.
recordings. Yeah. Yeah, they've got to be less slick, I guess. Otherwise, it's a documentary, and that's
Yeah.
not what we're trying to do, isn't it?
If
Just
they
a
want
low
a
budget.
documentary, I could show them a documentary and save a lot
Exactly.
of
Yeah.
time.
If we had the budget for camera crews and things, that'd make it different. Yeah, that was brilliant. Thank you very much. So it sounds like the biggest challenge is going to be balance, really. What would you say, just as a final note, what would you say your uh, biggest lesson for yourself has been this past year?
I think that I've definitely learned about myself that I'm more of a control freak than I thought.
Good.
Maybe I need to let things go a little bit more.
Unless it works, unless being in control works. That's a poignant thought to finish on, I think. Yeah, more of a control freak, and we're probably all a bit more that way now.
I think
Now that
so.
we've been just responsible for our own days in our own homes, we're used to have more control over that.
Yeah.
That's a good lesson. Yeah, a good teachable moment, as it were. Yeah.
Teachable moment. Try not to be a control freak. Well, it's just, the thing is, it's so rewarding sometimes to be a control freak, because sometimes you're like, I know how I want this done. I'm going to do it. And then it's done the way you want it to be done.
It's like loading the dishwasher. I'll just do it myself, because then it will make sense. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just figuring out how to manage the, what can you give up and what can you not give up, basically.
Yeah. And trusting other people to take some of those things as well, I think, which we'll only get more of once we're back all together a bit more, and you're a bit more aware of that their skills have increased over the last year, that they can take on more.
And it's much nicer to meet with someone to talk about how something's going to be done in the staff room over some coffee and biscuits, compared to setting up yet another Teams meeting that someone has to fit into their day,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a lot of good ideas come out of bumping into someone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, brilliant. Nice to catch up with you. Learned a lot about your last year. And
no doubt everyone will listen and they'll be like, oh, yeah, I want to talk about myself for.
Exactly. They would have woken up and they want to go, I had the exact same problem. Yeah. Thank God I'm not alone, which is
I want to tell you about how bad it's been for me.
Exactly. Yeah. Everybody unload. And that's what this is all about.
You might need a psychologist on your panels.
So, yeah, we have to bring in. We've got a therapist on board now, and tell us your problem. Yeah. Well, that's the end of episode 2. Thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that some of that resonated with you. Make sure you join us again in future episodes to hear about another perspective on the year we've just had in U+WE Teachable Moments.